life knew Zoom, right? Is that, but that in particular is the single greatest freeze frame of all time in hot take history. So we are going to introduce our guest. Welcome to the show, Hot Take Nation. It is DRW here. Today we are going to talk about things that confuse me. There are a lot of things that confuse me. Bitcoin 100% is one of them. We're going to come back to Bitcoin. We're going to start today, before I introduce our guest, I went for a massage today. It's a massage envy. It's not one of those backroom parlors, not going to lie, so I needed to just put that out there. And they require the customer wear a mask and the person giving the massage wear a mask. Cool. Now, my Karen, who gave me the massage, actually went under the table to confirm that while I was face down, I had the mask covering my mouth, which seemed a little excessive if I'm not gonna lie. And then, while she was giving me a massage, while she was wearing a medical mask, and I was wearing a medical mask, and I was face up and she was massaging my shoulder, she kind of had the one arm going with the head turned and sort of like the old reach around on the shoulder, and it was the worst massage I've ever given. And I just want to understand, if I'm wearing a mask and she's wearing a mask, how many more barriers do we need? I thought she was going to bring out a hazmat suit for me. That confused me, but not as much as Bitcoin. So today in the show, we have Rete Browning and Tom Masiero, who have come on. They're going to talk about two interesting topics. Number one, Bitcoin. But number two, you've been hearing those stories about flare gas being used to power the mining, which takes an unbelievable amount of power. Well, these two guys do it. I am so excited to have you on the show. Rete and Tom, what's going on? How are you?
Nice to be here.
Awesome. Well, Tom, let's start with you because we're going to.
Thanks for having us on the show.
I'm thrilled to have you. We're going to be getting Rete in all the freeze frames. So just make sure you keep that face solid because it's always good. Tom, why don't you give us a little intro into what you guys are doing and what you've been doing around the Bitcoin world?
Sure. So we started out kind of by accident going into Bitcoin mining. We have a technology company. Our parent company is a technology company that works in the digital advertising space. About 5 or 6 years ago, we were contacted by some of the owners of large Bitcoin online sites who said, hey, we want to use your technology to sell advertising directly to potential advertisers. But here's the catch. We don't want to take credit card. We don't want to take any other forms of payment other than Bitcoin. Can you still use your technology to make it work? We knew nothing about Bitcoin at the time. We were looking for new customers. So we just said, sure, let's see if we can do it. This was before, the large kind of, upticks in the price a couple years ago. So we did a couple of sites, didn't really think anything of it. Over a period of time, we started essentially attracting all of these Bitcoin related sites. And before we knew it, during the bull run of 2016 and 2017, we were accumulating lots of Bitcoin, and we basically worked with like 95% of the largest Bitcoin sites in the world. So then we said, oh man, what do we do with all this magical internet money? Let's figure out how to make more of it. And so that's when we started down this path of Bitcoin mining, which is, these individual machines that you plug in. They're extremely power intensive. And essentially you have like a programmatic way to print money. It costs money to print it, but, it essentially does prints Bitcoin. So we went down this crazy wormhole essentially of buying 100 of these little boxes and thinking we could just go plug them in at a warehouse and it would be super easy. Little did we realize that it was a little bit more difficult than that. In order to get cheap, reliable, scalable power, those are three things that are very, very difficult to do.
So you just hooked up a wind turbine and solar, and off you go?
That was the initial thoughts. It was like, hey, can we just go plug it into a power source? And so we started, talking with folks in the Northeast, because that's where I'm originally from, with biomass plants, trying to hook in behind the lines. But the more we went down this road, and we wanted to achieve scale, the more we realize like the only way to do this is to go directly to the energy source. And so we needed sub 3-cent power all in to compete with the upper 1% of Bitcoin miners, which are primarily outside the United States. That's another topic, but we wanted to bring that into the United States.
Okay, so I have so many questions. Can we start with the magical currency that is Bitcoin? What is it?
Sure. What do you think it is?
Well, see, if I'm totally honest, I have no idea. It is so far beyond me in terms of like what it is. But my understanding is it's some sort of algorithm that is like blockchain, which I still don't totally understand, that somehow is not like replicatable except by creating these math algorithms or whatever, and then that is the currency. And so somehow you manufacture math out of the air to create a thing that people want to own. That's the best I've ever managed to come up with what the hell this is. So tell me what it actually is.
Sure. So I think in order, and I think everyone starts where you're at right now. The most important part of the story is that you have to go to its inception. Its inception is that it was created by a pseudonymous inventor named Satoshi Nakamoto. That probably wasn't his real name. No one knows where he is or who he is, but it came out of the financial crash of 2008.
He's with Kaiser Sose right now, I think.
Probably. In 2008, he initially, I think, at least from all of the cryptography mailing list that he started working on this. It started off as a project, in a sense, to deal with what he saw happening with major financial institutions, central banking, of being able to just print money. And he just said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so he worked on this project for years and years. And then eventually in end of 2008, beginning of 2009, he essentially launched this project into a very small kind of nerd group of cryptography folks who were very interested in this type of scientific work. And it kind of started out as an experiment. And what makes it special is that it is peer-to-peer. So any other digital, what do you want to call it, value transfers that take place online right now, there's always someone in the middle, whether it's PayPal, your bank. And so like if I go to send you money via your PayPal account, theoretically, PayPal can still take it out of, can do a refund eventually from your bank. You don't actually control the funds in your bank. So what Bitcoin does that changes the game is that it creates a value to value. Like if I was handing you cash, no one could get in the middle of that. That's what it's doing digitally, because once I send you money into your wallet, into your digital keys, those are yours. No one can take those funds back. So when you use it for the first time, especially for our business, what happened was we had large, buys that were taking place, like $30,000-$40,000 buys. We'd wait like a week and a half for these funds to go through wires, and things would happen. And we just said, we don't want to deal with that. Same thing with credit cards. There's about a 2 to 3% chargeback kind of fee that's probably kind of on average for most online retailers, right? So that's 2 to 3% of your revenue that you pretty much have to write off every year that you're going to get chargebacks on. So we implemented a policy like 3.5-4 years ago that said any purchases over $10,000, you got to use Bitcoin, especially in the crypto space. And we started doing that, and of course, it's great. It's like a superpower, because like literally within 5 to 10 minutes, that money is yours. There's no waiting periods. There's nothing. And we own it, which I think is very liberating right now. The last component that I would say to kind of try to make this as simple as possible is that the algorithm, which you correctly stated, limits the production of Bitcoins to only 21 million ever being made. Now you can break them up into however many fractions you want. You don't have to only own one Bitcoin, but there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin made. And right now in circulation, there's about a little under 19 million. So it's a kind of a scarce asset in that sense. A lot of people refer to it as digital gold. So that's the fire hose version.
Quasimodo, I know that's not his name, but this fictitious character created some sort of math algorithm that would only be able to be solved 21 million times. Is that the correct character? Like, what puts the limit on 21 million? Like the US Fed, we just print US dollars and then you get all the money circulating through the economy, no big deal. What limits Bitcoin to 21 million?
Sure. So that's what makes mining really interesting, because miners and people who have these nodes, which essentially connect to the network, there isn't a database at Goldman Sachs, or, well, there is a database at Goldman Sachs and all of these large players that can control the ledger, essentially, right? In Bitcoin, that ledger is public. So if you have a computer, you at home can connect to it and you can check and verify. So that's what all these computers are doing, is they're utilizing this open database and checking against each other's errors. And in that, that's when they're getting their reward. So every 10 minutes or so, there's a new block. So a new row in the spreadsheet gets created, and whoever finds that puzzle during that time, that cryptographic puzzle, they get rewarded Bitcoins. And so, when it first started, you had people in their computers just like you mining, but then as the competition heated up, now you're seeing people with like power plants and just crazy
Because it's a race against time every 10 minutes to find this new thing. I mean, do you ever wake up in the morning feeling like you're a kid playing Dungeons and Dragons, like, and you need the adventure points, and like, you have the invisibility power, and then you got like the battle axe that I mean, it's so crazy to me. And then I look at my ticker and it says Bitcoin's now back up to like $12,000.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be experiencing the same sort of flight from the US dollar into anything, where no one has done a flight into hot take of the day merchandise yet as a store of value, but everyone seems to be going to all these other things. So if you're being paid in Bitcoin, the volatility seems like it would be some level of risk. No, is there a hedge against it, or your view is it keeps going up in value forever, so I'm going to hold the Bitcoin as long as possible?
Yeah, so there's two powerful, I would say, competing memes in this space, right? You've got like traditional money folks who have come in, who have utilized, the different financial instruments that are available. So there's lots of hedging, there's derivatives, there's futures contracts that people have used for about the last 2 years. And you've got like those folks, that's one camp. Then you've got this internet meme camp called HODL, which means like hold on for dear life. So these are folks which are essential to the platform, because it almost perpetuates a pumping no matter what, because you have all these people who are never going to sell it. So of course, because it's scarce, there's more limited supply. So those are the two camps that you have within this, and one side likes to trade, the other side likes to hold.
Okay, so I think I still have no idea, but I have a better not idea than I used to have. So thank you for that description.
That's a start.
Now, my also favorite, for those watching on YouTube, I think this is going to be my favorite interview, because where I think there's internet connections which we can all like understand from our Zoom life, and that sometimes like it just doesn't work. So you just freeze, and the looks are truly. Like, I mean, it's like Derek Zoolander has got better looking, has learned to turn left, and boom, we got Rete. So I don't know if we're going to hear from Rete at all during the podcast, but we're going to see the image every once in a while. So I'm excited about that. Now let's talk about the deals you've set up to use flare gas, because it seems to fit your 3-cent kilowatt hour price point. Talk about how you're doing that and how you're identifying people that want to sell the flare gas. What arrangements do you set up on that?
Sure. So Rete is the expert on the oil and gas side. So when we got questions kind of more, I'm sure that's where we're kind of going towards some of this stuff. So I'll just answer the question in terms of how we got started. It was kind of by sheer necessity. We were at a point where we had spent about 2 years or so trying to figure out how to do this at scale. kind of kept running into roadblocks dealing with kind of like buying on grid, even if we're buying wholesale, buying through a number of ways to purchase it. The transmission cost to actually get it made it so it wasn't viable at a larger scale. Rete has some contacts in Utah in the oil and gas industry. We reached out to one of them who we know that there's flaring caps associated with businesses out there. And so it was a simple conversation we had with somebody who wanted their itch to be scratched. They had flaring credits that they had to, not necessarily credits, but flaring, I would say fines that they could potentially have for flaring too much. We said, hey, I think we could burn that gas that you're just flaring, that you're getting as a waste byproduct from cleaning this frack water. Can we try this? And you know, it was a simple handshake deal, typical to oil and gas industry. And we literally had no idea what we're doing in terms of if it was going to work, because with mining or having any quote unquote data center, the uptime and reliability is paramount. You can't have something that's running, even 70 or 80% of the time. It has to be 98+%, uptime. So we tried it. We learned a bunch of things. We had issues with the gas quality because it wasn't just coming straight out of the ground. It was actually coming off of like water or vapor in these like treated water silos. So we got it to work. The videos, we took one video of it and was kind of sent around to, like our friends and stuff and our colleague network. And one of them saw it and said, hey, I work up here in North Dakota. I'm going to this conference about flaring tomorrow. Do you mind if I talk to somebody about it? And we said, sure, go ahead. And she walked right up to the head of a large oil and gas producer, public oil and gas producer, and said, hey, I've got colleagues who are working on this here. Here it is. Would you guys be interested in it? And timing wise, it worked out great because we have another competitor who has raised a substantial amount of money, who had basically just started doing some prospecting up there, and they had heard about it, and then they asked us for a quote. So last year around this time, we started engaging with doing the MSA process and getting a job order and doing everything we needed to do to be compliant, to be on a well pad. And we started consuming wellhead gas back in November, beginning of December. So their issue though was not so much to sell gas or to make it, make value out of it. Their problem was, like Utah, we're producing oil. That's where our money comes from. This gas thing is a pain in the butt for us to deal with because they have caps that are related to it. Can you just make this problem go away? So they were willing to give us the gas, and we were looking at it from a perspective of like, okay, now we need to actually figure out how to make this work reliably. And so that's where we've been for the last 7 or 8 months, is figuring out how to make it work, which we have because we have smart people like Rete.
Great. Okay, so here's a question that kind of ties to where we started. There's 21 million total coins. There's 19 million been mined. One every 10 minutes. So like 6 an hour, 140 a day. I mean, that's a lot of days, obviously, before it's all mined. So, but there's just no way to go faster? Like it will be produced at a rate. So for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, I guess, if I did the math right, you're just going to be able to mine 1 an hour. What's your success rate? If you're competing against thousands of companies that only get 1 Bitcoin an hour, do you win 1 a day, or do you win 1 a week, or how does that even work?
Yeah. So, of course, capitalism creates a lot of interesting competitive, I would say, innovations. And in the Bitcoin mining space, it's very similar. What happened about 4 or 5 years ago was the invention of mining pools. So, it's basically a conglomerate of folks who come together and share in aggregate their hash power, which is what our computing power is called in Bitcoin mining. And that aggregate hash power is put together, and then we all share in the rewards that gets found in the network of that pool. So there is kind of a way where we can programmatically be able to figure out how much money we make every day. Like it's almost like clockwork. We make about the same. Some days are a little more, some days are a little less, but that's what it ends up working out to. So if we were on our own and we weren't utilizing this pool, Yes, we could go weeks, months. We could catch a block every couple of minutes or every 20 minutes if we wanted to, but the likelihood of that happening, or the odds, that's just the statistical odds of that happening, would be very high, or I mean, very low.
Are there other digital currencies that are mined as well? I mean, presumably, I mean, this market kind of feels to me like carbon credits, is that someone has built this system that isn't really about, I mean, it is to a degree, but presumably the founder already had 7 million Bitcoins, and then they created this thing. And so like they've created wealth, just like carbon credits aren't really about reducing carbon. It's about wealth transfer. Someone has to buy the credits for someone who created the credits, who bought them from someone who didn't have any use for them and would have taken $10. And you've created this fantasy exchange. I mean, I know that's a cynical view, but is that what it is for Bitcoin? And if so, or if not, doesn't that mean there's going to be hundreds of digital currencies competing at some point, or if they might be already now?
Ree, you want to take the first part of the question?
Reed, there's no internet where you're coming from, so we might have to just go. Tom might have to stand in for you today.
Yeah. You know, the short answer to your question is yes, there are other cryptocurrencies that are out there. The difference between Bitcoin and those other cryptocurrencies is, as you stated, there is like a founder or a foundation or a centralized kind of figure at all of them. What separates Bitcoin from those is that there is no, like Satoshi's gone. He has a certain amount of coins that you can see that he, mined at the beginning, but he's not in charge. There's a program that runs. There's a group of software developers. They're on GitHub, which is a site where this stuff all takes place. It's open source, so anyone can check this. And there's not really any way to manipulate. It's the most open version of cryptocurrency there is. So there's kind of a level playing field. Bitcoin has taken a unique stance because it is extremely energy intensive. The algorithm that gets solved is called proof of work. So the greenies get a little upset with it because they say, look at how much energy is burned consuming this. And some of the other cryptocurrencies out there have tried to be like kind of rebrand as kind of like the green friendly version. Unfortunately, there's no way to extract value from that. Like the money that we spend to power our power generation equipment, to buy the machines, that all has to pay for itself somehow. And that's why like this Bitcoin energy meme that's taking place right now is so powerful, because it's kind of like currency for energy providers in a way.
Right. Well, and it's really interesting because I talk to a lot of people who are thinking about starting a new business, and when they think about a pivot from oil and gas, one of the key things that I say is barriers to entry is massively important to prevent a proliferation and to give pricing power. And so, notwithstanding the view that, it's using a lot of energy, but I mean, so too does mining lithium for batteries. So too does using the electric arc furnace, like the most energy intensive name in the history ever to make solar panels. Well, so does, smelting coal into iron to make the windmills. Like everything we do, we take energy to make energy. So it seems pretty logical to me. At what point do you look, and this sort of a broad market question, I talked to my hedge fund friends about this, and I'm like, Apple is $450 a share. It was $200 a year ago. Amazon is $3,400 and trades at 180 times earnings. Like at some point, the reality has to set in, and there's a fundamental value that these things have to trade at. At what point in the Bitcoin sphere, and how would you even assess what the price of Bitcoin would be for it to be overvalued? Like I see the quote, I don't know what it is today, but somebody sent me a text yesterday. They said they bought some, they're up 30% in 2 weeks, and it's 11,600 a coin. Let's assume that's right. Like at 25,000, are you like, yeah, we got to sell at 80,000? Like what is the intrinsic US dollar value of this product?
Yeah. So, I'll answer your question in two parts. Paul Tudor Jones, extremely, successful macro trader and very well respected, came out, I think, right during the crash back in like March, April-ish, and made a case for Bitcoin. And the way that he made it from, I would say, like, from like a strictly philosophical perspective was, it's about adoption rate. And right now he sees the adoption rate it's extremely small, versus like the overall addressable market. He looks at, he talked about his kids and he's like, look, my kids don't even have a bank account, or they've never seen a check, right? But they send Venmo and PayPal to each other. So natively, this idea of digital currency, even though it's like weird for us Gen Xer types, like we're kind of like feet in both, realms. For the younger folks, this is just, it's like in 15 years, even sooner than that, this is just how you're going to do. They have their phones, that's how they do things. So you take that versus the price movement. If you look at the 10 years that Bitcoin's been around, people have been trying to hack Bitcoin. Now, I'm not talking about hacking into a centralized exchange like your bank. That's not how Bitcoin is kept. People can keep them on there, but that's not how it's, that's not hacking Bitcoin. So for the last 10 years, people have been trying to actually hack the algorithm, try to manipulate, the amount that gets sent, and it hasn't been, because all this computing power, which keeps growing, is protecting this network from that happening. There are certain bulls in Bitcoin. They're called Bitcoin maximalists. You'll run on them. You'll run through them on Twitter. They're a very aggressive group, very loud.
Kind of like the EFT group in Energy FinTwit world on Twitter.
Okay, cool.
And I think every commodity class has its group of people promoters on Twitter.
Yes, they're cultists. I probably would agree with a lot of what they say, and I'm a Bitcoin maximalist in terms of thinking that out of all the cryptocurrencies that there are, Bitcoin will reign supreme, in terms of like how it's designed. There is a lot of people who determine the upside to be as high as $10 million a coin at some point. If you just want to take a smaller snapshot, though, is if we were having this conversation 3 years ago, around this time, in 2016, 2017, Bitcoin was $2,500. And from July of that year to the end of December, it went on a run all the way up to $20,000. Obviously it was a bubble, but things have kind of, the equilibrium has kind of gone back to where it should be in terms of what the value is. But that was a 10x rise. It has had numerous jumps where it kind of goes to a level and then it kind of, self-corrects, but then it makes another jump. And if you go through the 10 years of how long Bitcoin's been around, you see those programmatic jumps. So I don't think it's crazy to see the next jump in time. So if we're at 10 grand right now, 9 grand, I wouldn't be surprised to see 100 grand within the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay. So what you talked about is, so I can get my head around Venmo, and, I have an account, someone has an account, we're transacting through, I don't totally understand the mechanics, but basically emailing, I promise to send you money, and then the banks do their thing. Mm-hmm. The 15 years from now, kids are going to use Bitcoin, is sort of what you said. And you still need US dollars or some level of currency to buy them unless you're mining them. And so I guess where I'm missing a little bit is I'm going to take my US dollars that are worth $1 million, and $1 million is a lot of US dollars. I'm going to go buy one of these crypto coins that has $1 million of value, but I mean, tomorrow,
very volatile.
And now it's 500,000, I've lost 50%, or now it's 2 million, I've made 100%. And again, I'm not saying that what the Fed is doing, printing currency, makes me feel good. In fact, it makes me feel sick to my stomach. I can't sleep. I am so confused because of the badness that could come. But sure, there still has to be some level of societal support of this currency that we call the US dollar. What I struggle with is the Bitcoin societal support to drive $1 million or 100,000 a coin, because yeah, that I guess that's the question slash comment slash, like, help me put my mind, reconstruct my mind.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why we're so focused on trying to make this particular application of Bitcoin mining work, because we believe that the U.S. should be a power player in Bitcoin innovation. Most of the developers and a lot of the technology that supports Bitcoin is built here in the United States. However, most or the majority of the mining power that takes place to kind of protect the network is in China, right? We believe that having a stronghold here in the US, specifically backed by the US energy sector, because we, like, our long-term, I don't even see it long-term, 5-year Nostradamus claim is that the largest Bitcoin miners in the world in 5 years will be oil and gas producers.
Okay, Reed, it looks like we have potentially a window of internet capability.
Yeah, I moved locations. Yeah, sorry.
This is welcome to the quarantine world where internet connectivity is a big deal. So why don't you weigh in on some additional thoughts other than what Tom and I have been talking about?
Okay, so you made a comment about similarities with carbon credits.
Yeah.
Right? So if you, and I've had a little bit of experience in the carbon credit world, if you, the reason for the carbon credit is that not all CO2 is made equal. Not all carbon is made equal, right? So, do I put in a $300 million investment in a coal plant, whereas I could go offset it, the same carbon molecule somewhere in Indonesia? The resulting effect is the same, right? So do I want to invest in $300 million here or $10 million over in Indonesia and get the same result? Answer's pretty clear. And we kind of look for power in that same way, saying, we're not location specific.
Yeah, you're location agnostic. You're power price sensitive.
Yeah, power price sensitive, location agnostic.
Okay.
As long as we have a satellite uplink, internet that way, we can do that from Siberia if we really wanted to.
So what I found really interesting about what you and Tom actually both kind of combined to say is this concept of being close to the cheap energy, and you would certainly argue that oil and gas companies are in flaring in particular in close to cheap energy, and so it does seem interesting that with that access, like, is that you really see, like, Occidental, BP, they come out with their big new strategy. We're going to support our dividend by mining Bitcoin. I mean, that's something you could see.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain level of and I didn't get it either till I actually saw one of our containers live. We've got all these motion cameras inside of our box, because essentially it's this like autonomous command center, because we don't have access to it very readily. It's in the middle of an Indian reservation. It's difficult to get access to the pad. But even like all the oil, the patch workers who are there, they'll just come by and hear it, because like it's almost like going to a motorsports race. Like, motorsports racing is great when it's okay when you watch it on TV, but if you've ever gone to a racetrack and you can smell the gas, the rubber, the smoke, all of those things, it makes for it's real. And likewise, when you hear these machines going, I mean, it sounds like a jet engine that's just buzzing. You can hear the fans going. Obviously, the generators are going. So it's not a situation where it's truly a black box, like a lot of, I would say, kind of solutions are. You can see it. It's like making smoke, doing its thing. And I think the more oil and gas folks who see that happen right next to their flare or right next to their gas processing plant, to utilize the waste gas or the whatever you want to call it. It's a glut for them at that point to actually create value, because all it really is, when in its simplest forms, is another market. That's really what it is. Instead of sending it into a pipeline to a monopoly, you're saying, okay, I can hedge. I can either send it into a pipeline where it's going to be diminishing returns over a period of time, which you pretty much have to know, and you don't have a choice. Or there's this other market that I can create my own pipeline, a digital pipeline. So that's how we kind of see the future.
So what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to understand more on whether it's like buying coin from you, participating as a miner, being an oil and gas company, transforming their business? What's the best way to get hold of you guys?
Sure. So two ways. I would say for someone who just is looking to understand more about Bitcoin, I would recommend going to Twitter, searching, a term like Bitcoin Twitter. You're going to fall down a wormhole. There's a lot of good, smart people. There's a lot of smart macro folks that are in the game too, from the Real Vision guys, talk about Bitcoin a lot. So from that side, I do your education. We probably won't be able to help you when it comes to buying Bitcoin. That will. If the type of folks we want to engage with, who want to connect with us directly at www.gam.ai, are folks either in the energy sector or oil and gas specific, who might have an interesting use case where they've got supply glut. Something doesn't allow them to get some of their molecules to market, and maybe there's a way that we can work with them. We see ourselves almost as like a Halliburton of sorts for this particular use case moving forward.
Well, I will say, I feel like we were in a Game of Thrones episode, and that I went beyond the wall and I saw dragons for the first time, and I still can't totally believe that they exist, but clearly they do. And I really appreciate you guys coming on the podcast to talk about it. I think it's a fascinating sector of the economy that's growing. And I think it more than anything sort of talks about, sometimes we get myopic in oil and gas, and we really focus on all the wonderful things we've done to create energy for the world. But we forget about all the other industries and the things that they're doing also to create value, and that there is a world beyond the wall of oil and gas. And so as we continue in this transition, in this weird carbon neutral, somehow biomass burning a tree and planting a tree is better than carbon credits for CO2. I don't totally understand how that's even possible, but that is the world we live in. There are dragons, there are wildlings, there's a wall, and I appreciate you guys for joining. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this was a fascinating episode of Hot Take of the Day in a topic I knew absolutely zero about. I now know somewhat more, and I am going to go vanish into the world of Twitter. Until the very next time, be safe, be good, have a great day.